Hi, and welcome to Intuitive Guidance from Animals. My name's Michele Lowry. I'm an animal intuitive, and I co-host with Lisa Schermerhorn. This show got birthed because we truly love and believe our animals bring far more than being a pet. We believe that they are mirrors, that they have a soul connection with us. We also believe that they have profound and transformative messages that can change our lives really drastically. This show is attracting so many incredible guests with stories about their animals that are really there to help everybody else. The topics and the subjects are vast, and I wanted to share with you that this podcast, our guest is Temple Grandin. And Temple Grandin was amazing at being able to be a visual thinker. She still is, just to say, a visual thinker. She was able to transform the way cows go into slaughter by looking at what they see and cutting back on the fear and the stress that they were experiencing. Because she's a visual thinker, she also had to find her way through learning in a different way. She is autistic, and so she has done incredible work around the autistic community to bring enlightenment to how to use the incredible minds of these autistic people so that they can be out in the community doing wonderful things with all of their gifts. And the blend of the visual thinking mind and the amazing work that Temple has done over many years, including cattle handling, including what are we doing with dog breeding, including how are we really helping our horses when we're forcing them or we're using their behavior rather than seeing what they see and changing the picture so they release their fear. This interview is outstanding, incredible. I really hope you enjoy it, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Hi, Lisa Schermerhorn here with my co-host Michele Lowry, and it's a privilege and an honor to have Temple Grandin here on our show, Intuitive Communication with Animals. And I will tell you that Temple is an extraordinary woman and an incredible mentor of mine and of Michelle's. I had minor learning disabilities as a child, and I struggled through school, and I didn't think that I was very smart. And when I learned about you, you inspired me so much with what you've been through, Temple. Temple talks about very freely that she was diagnosed with autism as a child, and she's also done a tremendous amount of work in the cattle industry, and I'll read you her bio. She's a distinguished professor of animal science at Colorado State University, and she's designed facilities for handling livestock are used by companies such as McDonald's and Wendy's, Whole Foods, and she's been instrumental in implementing animal welfare auditing programs in those companies and other corporations. She's appeared on numerous television shows, including 2020, Prime Time. Her books include Thinking in Pictures, Livestock Handling and Transport, The Autistic Brain. Her books, Animals in Translation and Visual Thinking, have been on the New York Times best-selling list. Temple was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in September of 2017, and in 2022 was named a Colorado State University Distinguished Professor, and in 2023 was inducted into the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame. There's also a TED Talk that she did that has almost 7 million views, as well as an incredible movie about her life starring Claire Danes called Temple Grandin. So Temple, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's great to be here.
Yeah, welcome.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit, as I mentioned, as someone who had minor learning disabilities going through a public school system and really struggling, not quite fitting in. How was your journey growing up? as someone was diagnosed as with autism, and that was what, in the late 50s, early
No, I would
60s?
have been, I was born in 47, so
47.
it would have been right around the 49 that I was
Right.
taken into a neurologist. I actually was taken to a neurologist. I did not speak until age 4. I got into a very good early educational program. I can't emphasize how important that is if you have young children that are not speaking. Now, I did not learn to read until age 8. And the way I learned to read was reading out loud, sounding out my words phonetically. You know, none of this complicated stuff they got on the internet. I already knew my alphabet. I could sing the alphabet song, which has about half the sounds. Then mother just taught me the sounds, like A has 2 sounds, A and ah. And then we got a book worth reading. And mother had done a lot of reading to us out of books. And so take The Wizard of Oz and read a page, stop in the really interesting part. Let me sound out 3 or 4 words. And then gradually I did more and more, and she read less and less, but it was all out loud in the beginning, which I think was important. And then I had to learn how to read silently, so I'd whisper really quietly.
So is that how you learned to read, that the reading out loud was really the way that you learned in
Well,
school?
then I could sound out my words.
Okay.
See, by reading out loud, I could sound out my words. And I know there's a lot of controversy now about teaching phonics, and I think we should teach phonics. But I look up some of the phonics lessons. I think it's complicated nonsense. You know, the ABC song, I did know that. I went back and I went through that, and I figured it had about half the sounds. And then you start learning some rules, like an E on the end, the vowel is long, things like that. And then you have to learn how to combine sounds, like the CR for like cracker, words like that. And no, the reading out loud was essential for me to learn.
So now, as you were in school, and I watched this in the movie, you had to endure quite a bit of frustration from other students and teachers and people who didn't understand you. How did you have the resilience? I work with the unconscious mind and mindset, so I'm very curious about, I know you talk about how you think in pictures, but how did you deal with your emotions and deal with all of the bullying and things that
Oh, the
you
worst
dealt
thing,
with?
fortunately, I got through elementary school or primary school, as they call it in Europe, without bullying, because my 3rd grade teacher explained to the other students that I had a disability that was not visible, like a wheelchair. And that was really helpful. Then in teenage years, absolutely the worst. Absolutely the worst. And the only place I had friends was friends who shared interests. Horseback riding, really big for me. I got introduced to cattle as a teenager, which brings up another important thing. Kids have got to get introduced to stuff to kind of figure out what they might like, what they might be good at. I was just on a panel discussion yesterday with some autistic people. One of them was an IT person and good at music. I said, well, if you'd never been exposed to musical instruments, how would you ever find out you could play them? You'd have to be exposed to them. I had a little flute. I could never figure out how to play it. And I'm a big fan of developing the strengths, because autistics tend to have good at one thing. It might be a math autistic kid, or I'm a picture thinker autistic kid. So my kind of mind tends to be good at animals and mechanical things. That's the kind of stuff I'm good at.
Well, I saw in the movie, and I'm curious because I think I saw some articles about that you were instrumental in being part of consulting with that movie. Was that true, that that movie was pretty accurate
Well, let's
about
talk
you?
about the super accurate parts of it. It shows how I think visually.
Yeah.
That's absolutely accurate. And all the projects I did are real. Those were made off of original drawings. That's the most accurate part of it.
Okay. So it's incredible, if you haven't seen this movie, the way your mind thinks and the intricacies of your drawings were incredible.
And the movie title is simply Temple Grandin.
Yes, yes. And you had a teacher there, and what is it, in high school, that believed in you?
Yeah, I had a great science teacher. I can't emphasize enough the importance of mentors and teachers. There was Anne out at the ranch out west, and there was Mr. Carlock, my science teacher. And he tried to teach me algebra. That was hopeless. There's nothing to visualize. And I'm concerned that us visual thinkers are going to get screened out. And I explained to business people, you need us. on mechanical things. I worked with people who had metalworking shops, had 20 patents each that were undiagnosed autistic, and they couldn't do algebra either. You know, it's a different, visual thinking is a different kind of thinking. Now we need our mathematicians too. And I've been hearing very bad stories just very recently about primary school mathematics kids turning into behavior problems because they were forced to do baby math over and over again when they should have just been moved ahead. I'm not suggesting putting a third grader in high school. What I'm suggesting is get the high school books and let him just work on them.
You know what? I so agree with you, because algebra for me, I couldn't understand it. It didn't make sense. There was nothing tangible about it.
Yeah,
It
well,
was
you
just,
say tangible, nothing to visualize. Now, certain mathematics, like for example, sizing hydraulic cylinders on equipment, yes, I can learn that formula because I can see the piece of equipment. Or trig function for a suspension bridge. I can understand that because I see the bridge.
That's like
fascinating.
my brother really, well, we both struggled in school because we weren't academic and we didn't learn the way that the school system taught. So we both really struggled with gathering and gaining information. And my brother really struggled. My brother actually left school at 16. And he didn't have a subject or a topic that he was really kind of excelled in when he was at school. But when he left school and he got himself a job and he ended up in real estate, he could work out percentages for mortgages in a split second. And I think it's that same thing. There was a purpose and a reason behind what
Well,
he
the other thing
did.
with mortgages, it's a percent.
Yep.
So I can see that on a pie chart.
Yes.
I tend to want to convert things to percentages. I mean, let's just take a simple feed trial where one type of feed, the cattle gain more weight than another type of feed. Well, what's the percent difference?
Yeah.
Okay, they were 10% heavier or 15% heavier. See, then I see the graph. My mind tends to do that.
So my question is, since you see in pictures and visualize, what was it about the cattle that drew you to them? What was it about them that really
One of the
compelled
very
you?
first things I did with cattle, in fact, I've taken all my livestock papers and I've put them together in this is a book of all my best livestock papers, the Grandin papers. And the first thing I ever did was to look at what cattle were seeing. And people thought that was really weird. Cattle would be going through a chute at a feedlot to get vaccinated. And if there was a coat on a fence, they'd stop. Chain hanging down, they'd stop. A shadow on the ground. And I call them the distractions. And nobody had ever thought to get inside the cattle handling facility and see what cattle were seeing. And when I first did that, that was real radical stuff. You know, also back when I started academically in 1990, I was not allowed to use the word fear in my papers. I had to write agitated behavior. You know, they were still saying animals did not have emotions, even though the neuroscience literature was 20 years ago, done 20 years prior, definitely said they did have emotions. And I discussed that. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze.
Bless you.
And I discussed that in my book, Animals Make Us Human. Jack Pence kept the 7 animal emotions: fear, anger, separation distress, that's different than fear, seeking or exploration, sex, mother-young nurturing, the oxytocin system, and play. This is where science often gets siloed. And I did one of the first papers where I brought the concept of fear and the research in the neuroscience literature into the animal science literature. It's a paper called Assessment of Stress During Handling and Transport. I did in 1997. But I actually had reviewers make me take the word fear out of a paper in the early 90s.
Wow. That's so interesting, because as you get to know Michele is an animal communicator. And she refers to herself as an interspecies communicator, but she can tap into dogs, cats, anything, any animal. And
You know, my new book on visual thinking, I talk about people that are picture thinkers, math thinkers, and then more or less word, thinkers. And the word thinkers tend to be very abstract, big concepts. where my mind works in specifics. Okay, I get on autism panels and I talk about advocacy. Well, I tend to advocate for specific stuff. LED lighting that doesn't flicker, for example. Using checklists as sort of an external working memory. You know,
So what is it about
but these are specific things.
Right,
They're not
what is
big concepts.
What is it about the LED lights that flicker? What is the
For
impact?
some people, I'm not one of them. If you take your camera out, your phone, your regular phone video camera, and take slow motion video, you'll find that certain lights flicker. And for some autistic, dyslexics, and ADHD, they can see that flicker. I don't see it. But there's others that do. And I would say that could be the #1 environmental thing that may have to be fixed in the classroom. But it's something specific. You see, sensory issues. You know, people say, well, let's just, we got to accept autistic people. Well, a young man lost a job at United Parcel Service. That's a delivery service. I think it, because the uniform itched. Well, did you try washing it? That might have all been would have had done to fix it. Okay, I want to prevent a job getting lost over something like the uniform itched when it could have been fixed by washing. And if the uniform was truly horrible, let's approach UPS about the specific thing of maybe you know changing the fabric in the uniform. But that's something specific.
Right.
It's not, well, just accept us. I have problems with itching. The pants I've got on right now, I buy black pants at Walmart. I have to wash them 3 times before they're soft enough for a long airplane ride. And there's other pants I can't wear, they itch.
So you're a tremendous problem solver.
Yeah, that's,
you're like a thinking puzzles almost, like a detective.
Well, but you see, it's more pictorial. My memory is more like pictures on your phone, but they are language indexed. I can search through them, and my thinking is associative and tends to put things into categories, where the mathematical mind thinks more in patterns. And then I see people like, I was on a panel recently talking very abstractly about, accepting people with autism. I want to make sure that good jobs aren't lost because a uniform itched.
Right.
And it might be as simple as washing it twice.
Right. And also in your movie, I saw that you had invented as a young girl, there was the contraption that helped you regulate your emotions.
That I talk about in my book, Thinking in Pictures.
Yeah.
I noticed when cattle went through squeeze chute, when I was out visiting my aunt, this device to hold cattle, wild cattle, still for vaccinations. And some of the animals just kind of relaxed. So then, of course, I went and got in it. Well, there's a lot of people that where pressure is very calming. There's other ways you can do pressure, weighted blankets, weighted vests, but pressure's calming. Now, not everybody. You see, this is the thing about some of these sensory things. You know, I don't have the sensitivity to flickering LED lights, but there's other people that do. But sensory issues are real.
Right.
But I want to think of it, this, and I'm finding from all the talks that I'm doing that problems with sound sensitivity comes up all the time. I also figured out, talking to a lot of families, that one of the ways to help a child with sound sensitivity, if they hate something like the vacuum cleaner or some other noisy thing, let the kid turn it on and off. Let the kid control it.
Wow.
The vacuum cleaner may go to favorite plaything if they can control it.
Interesting. So how did you end up with the ability to control your emotions, to monitor them? Because you obviously can't bring
ended up doing for getting kicked out of school for fighting, I had to switch from anger to crying. That's what I had to do. Because if I had done anything aggressive, I worked in the meatpacking plants, you throw something that they fire you. They have no tolerance for aggression. And I would have lost my job. But I'd have places I'd go hide and cry. One of my favorite places is electrical rooms. Every time I go by a door that says electrical room, that takes me right back. And in a meat plant, they can't lock them because you have to get in there in an emergency, turn things off. And I knew what not to touch. But I'd go to places like that where no one would see me. And yeah, it wasn't easy. But crybabies don't get fired. I also think it's very interesting that when NASA canceled the space shuttle, the scientists cried on national TV and walked off. Maybe that's why they had those jobs, because NASA will fire you for anything. You throw a wrench at NASA, you're fired. They don't tolerate.
Interesting. So how did you switch that?
It just happened.
Really?
I don't really know how. It happened when I was in high school. After I've gotten a big fist fight in the cafeteria, and they took riding horses away for 2 weeks. It just happened. I don't really know how it happened.
Wow.
But that you think the fighting just gets you in too much trouble.
Incredible resilience that you have. And I don't know if Michele, you have any questions for her about the cattle and her working in that industry and the horses. I know you have a relationship with horses as well, correct?
I do.
The thing that helped me understand animals is being a visual thinker. I tell students, get away from language to understand animals.
I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and I said my English vocabulary is very limited, but it's because I live in a world that has no language.
Yeah.
You know, I live in that world with the animals and with nature, and there's no language. It is all sensory. It is all feel. It is all.
It's all sensory based, and I discussed that in my visual thinking book. In fact, I have a chapter on animal consciousness.
Yep.
And this article right here, this is in the current issue of Nature. I just read this morning. On language is not required for thinking. And there's a lot of brain scan. Here's the title of it right here. Brand new article. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Language is primarily a tool for.
But language is primarily a tool for communication rather than thought. This is the brand new June 20th, 2024 issue of Nature. I just read that this morning. And what they're showing in here that's very interesting is that other kinds of thought turn on different networks in the brain. And they were especially studying mathematical thinking, that had nothing to do with language. And now there's certain very abstract concepts. This article doesn't address this. All right, justice. It doesn't discuss these kind of concepts. The other thing that language would do for people is a storage of knowledge. That there's no way you could do that without language and making books and and manuscripts. Is the ability to store knowledge, but very abstract concepts. Now, when I think justice, I see the statue with the scales, and then I can think of something that would not be justice, some specific thing. Like somebody killed somebody, I'm saying a real simple example, and then they went to trial, they knew he was guilty, and he was gotten off. That'd be not justice. Yeah, you see, I have to think in very specific examples like that.
I love that visual though, because that would, using that scale as a visual and then putting something on one side of that scale and seeing
I see the scale. I see the scale and the statue that holds the scale.
Yeah, I totally could. I can see how that would be how you could visualize justice. And I'm also very visual, and so I work a lot in visual images and what they're doing and how they change. So, oh my gosh, that makes total sense. I love that.
Well, and that's an actual statue. It's a statue that's in the Supreme Court. It exists.
Right.
And somebody made up the idea of the scale. The very, very simple balance scale. Somebody made that up to put that on a statue. You see, and that's not based in language.
Right.
So when you started, you went to school, that was a big challenge for you because you originally did not want to go to college, is that correct?
Well, I just didn't know.
Right.
One of the things that what helped get me motivated was Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, gave me really interesting optical illusion projects to work on because I was fascinated by that. And then I did study because language became a way of to become, I mean, not language, excuse me, studying became a way to become a scientist. So that motivated me to study. I also was very lucky when I was in college to take an excellent class in animal behavior. This is back in the B.F. Skinner days where everything was environmental. But Dr. Evans, it was obvious to me, and he did a lot of studies of reptiles, that everything was not environmental. I was very lucky to have had that class. I was very lucky that my small college had that class from a retired Harvard professor that just came in twice a week to teach that class.
Wow. Yeah, it's remarkable how certain people can make such a big change in your life just from taking a class or having a mentor to really help inspire. What was the greatest inspiration? Who was the greatest inspiration for you?
Well, when I started out, there was another professor in New Zealand called Ron Kilgore, who had also looked at what sheep were seeing when they went through handling facilities. Now, of course, back then it was hard to get, you had to get the articles with interlibrary loan. It took weeks to get them. And I remember meeting with Ron Kilgore at a conference. I think it's very important for students to go to conferences. That's really important. And you know, there was another person, older than I was, doing some of the same things. So it wasn't a crazy thing to be looking at.
It was validation for you.
I'm sorry, didn't you?
It was validation for you that
Well,
now
that's right. It was validation that
Yeah.
somebody else was studying similar things and they were doing it in sheep.
And just, you know, just to have that concept that was even a thing was such a breakthrough back then, that these animals weren't just machines that, you know, you were raising in order to eat them. And it was just a business deal. You know, these were actually life-changing as far as giving these animals the opportunity to be seen.
Well, and I also had to find out that if they were afraid of getting slaughtered. So I would go back and forth between the big slaughterhouse, the Swift plant in Tolleson, Arizona, and the local feed yards.
Yeah.
Where they were just getting vaccinated. I found they behaved the same way in both places.
Yeah.
If they knew, they would have been much more difficult to get to move at the slaughterhouse. That wasn't the case. They were the same in both places. And they were afraid of the same stuff. You know, they don't like going into the dark. I just was reviewing some literature about horses, and, you know, if you light up the horse trailer so it's not a dark cave, the horses go in easier. And that's a study that was just published very, very recently. Validates stuff that I've said for years. You know, you light up the way in front so it's not a dark cave, but you can't have light blinding their eyes.
Right.
You want to light up the way, but you must not have blinding light.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And also, people misinterpret a horse not wanting to get on a horse trailer as bad behavior and not listening. And very rarely do they actually look into the possible reasons for that happening. I actually heard this story of a horse that desperately didn't want to get into this horse trailer. They shoved the horse into the horse trailer. They were going to a show. They were on a time scale. They had to get there. They got to the show. They pulled the horse out. There was a bee's nest in there.
Oh, no wonder.
And the horse was clearly saying in the beginning, could you just go in there and check what's going on? So the horse basically got stung like crazy.
Well, now it's not going to want to go on the trail if it gets stung. I want to emphasize it's so important that animals' first experiences with something new, like a horse trailer, be a good first experience.
Yes.
With a new piece of equipment, a new person, or a new place.
Yes.
Be a good first experience. Now, another common thing I have people say to me, well, my horse was fine at home and he went crazy at the show. Well, let's get them used to new things that will be at shows, like lots of flags, for example. Let's get them used to that. And one of the best ways to get them used to the flags would be to decorate the fence with flags, let the horses come up to it. The thing about new things, the thing about novelty, is that if you shove it in the face, it's scary. But if the animal can voluntarily approach that flag, then it becomes something interesting. Novelty is both scary and attractive.
And also, I feel that people don't give the animals the opportunity to express themselves if it doesn't fit within the agenda. And so if there's something new, it's expected that the horses, for example, are just gonna accept what's going on and be the good horse and act appropriately and behave. And then people get super upset when they don't. And no one's giving the horses that ability. They're fight or flight, whether they're domesticated or not. They're still fight or flight animals. And so give them the opportunity to make that choice. You know, give them the
give them a
space,
chance
like
to
you're
look.
saying.
You
Right.
know, I tell people if the animal stops, let's say, to drain in the floor,
Yeah.
give them a chance to put the head down, look at the drain.
Yeah.
And when they raise the head back up, then you can push them. But give them a chance to look at that thing. See, when the floor changes, maybe from metal to wood or something like that,
Yes.
they're gonna stop at that. Let them look at it. Also, animals get fear memories. In my book, Animals in Translation, I introduced you a horse that was afraid of black cowboy hats, because during a veterinary procedure, he'd had alcohol chucked in his face, and that was done by somebody with a black hat.
Yeah.
And they will tend to like pick out some obvious feature on a person, like maybe a white coat on a vet.
Yeah.
So it comes up, should the vet wear the white coat? It all depends upon how the dog perceives that coat.
Right.
If the first visit's all treats and petting, then that coat would be associated with something good. If the first time they saw somebody in a white coat harshly held down a rough way, then maybe you want to take the coat off.
Yeah.
You see, they tend to pick up on some obvious thing, a certain sound, some obvious thing like a white coat. Another dog was terrified of baseball hats because there was a man that beat them that wore baseball hats.
Yeah.
And if you can sometimes find the thing they're afraid of and remove it, that can often work really well.
Yeah, it does work really well. I've worked a lot in the shelters with dogs and cats that have had a traumatic history. And that's one of the things that we look at is going back far enough to see what happened so that we can help that animal heal from whatever was going on. And they normally will guide me into what that looks like. And then when they finally do get adopted, they're not taking that behavior into their new home, and now their new people have to figure out why this animal is freaking out. And we got a huge success rate of these animals not leaving the shelter with the same issues they came in with. So to your point, they do hold on to things, and then all of a sudden they get into their new home and they're suddenly reacting strangely, and people are worried about what's going on. But very rarely do people actually associate it with, let's try and find that root cause when it happened, and then heal from that place forward. And it's been amazing to watch animals with a traumatic background of any kind really be willing to come through it if you're willing to take the time to look at it. And that's what
you need to figure it out.
Yes.
Another common thing that happens is if you take the bit that a horse has been originally trained with, then it's usually a snaffle, the jointed snaffle.
Yeah.
That's a beginner bit. And the horse has been abused with the snaffle, then every snaffle is bad.
Yeah.
Because I've actually had a chance to do this in what we call a right horse class, where we take rescues and rehab them. And this horse was just frothing at the mouth and everything else, and took out the snaffle and put in a one-piece mouthpiece, calm right down. It was like opening a new file folder. Because I was able to remove the thing that felt scary. And then I have the students hold different bits in their hand. Here, now feel the jointed bit, feel the one-piece bit, and think about them as different feeling pictures. But often it generalizes a little bit, and then every jointed bit's bad. Now, some people say, well, do you hate snaffle bits? I said, no. But see, the problem is, since that's the beginner bit lots of times, if somebody's going to be rough with a horse, then that bit gets associated with being mistreated.
Right. I've seen the same with driving equipment when it doesn't fit right. If you go behind the horse that's been trained badly in driving, they literally don't want you to go back there because their experiences of that driving equipment has been a very negative and painful experience. So it's just, you've got to peel away the layers and really get down to what's going on. And also accepting not to dismiss it, it's usually a very simple answer, but people look for something very complicated. And it's not. 9 times out of 10, it's a simple answer. You just have to unravel enough and go far back enough to figure out what that is.
Well, and there are genetic differences in reactivity,
Right.
let's say between, British breeds of cattle and then the Lore, which is a Bos Indicus cattle. I did a cattle handling demonstration in Brazil, and the Lores could only do the demo once. But we had a Jersey, it was almost just a Jersey cow there. She was fine to do the demo 4 times.
Yeah.
That was just a difference in the temperament.
Yeah.
Because an animal that's got a reactive temperament, high fear temperament, when they get scared, they get more scared.
Yeah.
They have a bigger response, especially when they're suddenly startled.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you about the slaughterhouses. Because yes, we all, people eat meat, so they are a part of our world that we have, we have to contend with. But how was it for you to work there initially, and how were you able to make that transition of helping them better understand? Because you had to deal with the fact that they didn't even want to admit that animals actually experience fear. So that had to be an incredible amount of perseverance and convincing. How were you able to actually make those shifts and changes and deal with working at a slaughterhouse?
Well, the management of the particular slaughterhouse, cared. There were some bad people there, but what I found in all the places I went to working with cattle, a lot of feed yards and ranches, is cattle handling in the 70s was pretty terrible. Was terrible. But there were few places that actually handled cattle gently. There were few people that handled cattle right. And I can remember Bill and Penny Porter, Singing Valley Ranch, and they raised Herefords, and they were really good to their cattle. So that showed me that improving cattle handling was something we could do. And compared to the 70s, I'd say in the 70s, maybe 10% of the people handled cattle gently. Now it's probably 75%. It's improved a whole lot, and there's been lots of workshops to get people to improve handling, and that's really good.
How were you able to, to really convince people? Because with all of your background of what you've been through, I'm just curious of your mindset of how you have overcome so much. I'm always fascinated with the mindset of how you had to persevere as a woman, someone who was autistic, and someone who was introducing brand new concepts to these, men.
One of the things I was good at is I could see doors to opportunity. And what's happening with a lot of autistic kids today is they're not learning enough life skills, not learning enough just greeting people, going to stores and shopping. And one of the things that was done with me when I was 7 and 8 years old, along with every other kid in our neighborhood, so when the parents had a party, you had to be little hosts and hostesses at the party. That taught you talking to people. I'd sell candy for charity. That taught me talking to people. So I was at a cattle event, and the editor of the Arizona Farm Ranchman, our state farm magazine, was there. I went up and I got his card because I knew if I wrote for that magazine, that would really help my career. Women were a lot more accepted in ag journalism. I made myself a really good livestock editor. That helped me get credibility. But a lot of people wouldn't have the guts to go up and get the card. My party training served me well. And then when I started with the cattle handling, I wrote a lot of articles on how to design facilities. I wrote a lot of just how-to articles. I remember when I wrote my first article in Beef, that was our national cattle magazine, and it got picked up by Arkansas Cattle Business and another cattle magazine. I was so happy. This writing was really important, a part of my career, because that got seen by a lot of people. And so, but instead of just saying cattle handling is totally terrible in my writing, I said, this is how to do it right. And when you're rough with cattle, it costs money. And I made sure I let everybody know that. But it was also, there were some good people that supported me. And where most of the discrimination was with the foremans. It wasn't the owners of the places, and it wasn't the workers on the front line. it was middle management, which just about all of my trouble was. But I had some very good mentors. And then I had a contractor that was starting a small steel and concrete business. He seeked me out to design facilities, another very important mentor. Now, there were some good people that helped me.
What do you think it was about the foreman? Do you think that they felt threatened by you?
I think they felt threatened because just about all the trouble was middle management. I can think of 4 or 5 different places where that was the case.
So interesting. So now you're a professor now at it was at
Yes, that's
Colorado
right.
State University. So what type of classes do you teach? And talk to me about your students and what
Well,
that
I
experience has
teach
been
a
like.
course in livestock handling,
Mhm.
where the first lecture is the basic behavior. You know, the things like I show lots of pictures, shadows, and things that will make cattle refuse to move. Then I talk about flight zone, point of balance, basic behavior principles, discuss that. And then I talk about design of facilities. Then I talk about stress. I talk to you about the novelties, both scary and attractive. And then I talk about some of the animal welfare issues. Right now, what I'm very concerned about, in not just in farm animals but pets too, I'm gonna bash both of them equally, is just when we get the handling really good, we're getting more problems now with cattle that are lame, cattle with heart problems. We've bred so much for meat that their foot and leg structure is bad. And this is a problem that's slowly gotten worse. I'm really concerned about that, because to have good handling, I've got to have animals that are willing to walk. That's a problem. Let's look at dogs. The brachycephalic breeds, breeding dogs that can't breathe. That's terrible.
Right.
And if you over select for any single trait, whether it's production trait, appearance trait, or performance trait, like in a horse, you're going to wreck your animal.
Yeah.
And the problem is, as these problems slowly get worse, but I think those are some of the biggest welfare issues today. I'm very concerned about that. And when it comes to production animals, I like to look at genetic selection like this. It's like a national budget. If I put everything into the economy, meat, milk, or eggs, I shortchange the infrastructure, the skeleton. So I've got bad feet and legs, like twisted toes. I shortchange the heart. I shortchange the reproduction. Highest producing dairy cows, hardest to get her pregnant to have a calf. And then maybe I shortchange the military, the ability to fight disease. We have to look at it would be really bad from a sustainability standpoint, let's say, to go back to old-fashioned chickens, 15-20% more feed. But maybe what you have to do is you back off just a little bit on the production, just a little bit, and you can make a bunch of these problems go away. That's something I'm very concerned about right now. You know, like right now, one of my clients has got a meeting. I won't be able to go to it. And one of the things they're going to be talking about is slow-moving, difficult to handle cattle. My solution is don't breed them, period.
So those are, they're literally bulking them up so they're more efficient meat-wise.
Well, they just, and then selecting for traits like marbling and the heart failure problem. You see, this is bad becoming normal. The heart failure problem is slowly increased over about 10 or 15 years, very slowly. Now, being a visual thinker, I see it. The other people don't see it until it gets really serious. But just in the last 2 years, the hoof structure of cattle is just atrocious. You know, you've got crossed toes like that. That's a genetic defect.
Wow. So are these? I'm sorry.
But I'm going to bash the pets too. There's some of them are just.
Yes. Yep,
and
that's
for
the world that
appearance
I live in,
traits.
Temple. I live in that world and I advocate in that world, and I have been for a really long time in just everything is overdone, and the animals in the shelter have told me that humans are very much a discarding species. If you don't like it, you don't want it, you just get rid of it. And that's just such a big piece of what's going on. You overbreed, and then the ones that don't come out right, you just get rid of them. And
what some of the beef people did when they figured out that heart failure could be linked to single sires, they stopped using that bull semen. In other words, don't breed it in the first place.
It's having people acknowledge that there's more to this than just production.
That's
what
right.
I've gotten. That's what I've gotten. The very few cows that I've connected with, they're just talk about the justice balance, the balance of meat production to actually what's going to get used and what's not is out of balance. And that's where I'm living right now. There's huge sheep farming, and there's sheep and lambs everywhere. And every time I drive by the fields, my first feeling, my first sense is how many of these animals are actually going to get onto someone's table and provide nutrition and provide food, and how many of them are not, for whatever reason. The meat doesn't get sold, there's sickness or whatever else. And it's just this overproduction, and we've lost the balance of what we actually need, and we just discard the rest. And that's always been my advocacy.
Well, the thing that if an animal, let's say with someone's heart failure stuff, dies a week before its market weight, you've wasted all that meat.
Right.
There's nothing sustainable about that.
Right.
But the thing that happens is what I call bad becoming normal. If you ask a dairy producer, for example, to estimate what percentage of your cows are lame, 3 different studies have shown they'll underestimate by half. And then when you go and measure it, they're shocked when you actually measure it.
Right.
I call that bad becoming normal. And the thing about bad becoming normal, slowly creeps up on you. So slowly, you tend to not see it until it gets really bad.
Right.
No, when I eat meat, but I have problems with, like if I go to the big meatpacking plant and they got these big fat ones that don't want to walk, I've got problems with that. We should not be producing that kind of cattle.
Right. Absolutely.
It's quality of life and treating animals with humanity, because, when they've had that kind of a life, that energy is part of them too. We're consuming, it's not just the meat, we're consuming the energy around that meat as well. And people don't really think about when an animal's so in fear its whole life or mistreated. It's impacting us.
I have problems with the breeding. I just talked to Kathleen Cooney, who's on the veterinary faculty here, and she had to euthanize a pug that was bred so flat that it couldn't eat right. Its mouth was malformed to the point where it couldn't eat correctly. Right. I've got big problems with people breeding.
And their hips are so narrow, they have to be born by cesarean section.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. And no, I think it's absolutely terrible. And no, we should be breeding functional animals.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. Totally agree. I totally agree. Because then all we do is spend our days trying to fix the problem that didn't need to be a problem in the first place. If we stop trying to play God and create these funky, fashionable breeds for whatever reason, and stop messing with genetics where it doesn't need to get messed with, we'd have a whole lot healthier spectrum of animals to share our lives with. And we keep getting these fancy breedings now that are happening. I see them all the time. And my biggest question is why? Why are you trying to now create yet another mix that's going to have nothing but health issues? All the
The problem with things like the Labradoodles, and I tell people, if you just breed the offspring, the Labradoodle, you have too narrow a gene pool. I tell if you want a Labradoodle, you want I explain what an F1 cross is. You want one where one parent was a poodle and the other parent was a Labrador, and that animal's probably not going to have problems. But you see, trying to make a breed out of it, your gene pool's too small.
Right.
Yeah, that's going to be bad.
That's so interesting. I never thought about it that way. And what cracks me up is I had a poodle as a child, and there was always this connotation that they're prissy dogs, and they're not. But yet everyone's breeding other dogs with them because of all the great qualities that they have.
Well, the hair doesn't cause allergies. See,
right.
That's something some people. But I tell people, if you want one of these crossbreds, get an F1 cross, where the parent, like if it's a Labradoodle or a Golden Doodle or whatever, one parent's a Golden, the other parent's a Poodle.
Right.
You're not taking the crossbred F1 crosses and breeding them with other F1 crosses. and your gene pool's too narrow.
Yeah.
That is going to be trouble.
So
Yeah,
what do
and you do see it in the dogs. That's one breed. The other one that I see it in a lot is chocolate labs, where there's these neurological issues because there's issues in the first place, but I've seen a lot of chocolate labs that have a lot of neurological issues.
Well, yeah, and it's like some of the blue-eyed animals too have neurological issues.
Yeah.
And then you overselect for behavior traits, you end up with epilepsy. Yeah, you can have some traits are linked. Yeah, I remember reading about the old Belly F. Fox experiments that were done in 1974, and they took foxes that were on fur farms and they bred them to be gentle so they wouldn't bite you. Well, they ended up with a stockier border collie colored fox. All they did was select for gentleness. Traits are linked. Recently, I was at a lab animal meeting, and they have different immunocompromised mice that are used in cancer research. And there was a poster with all the different mice and a list of the different functions of the immune system that had been knocked out. Well, some of them were like little small white mouse, another one was a black mouse, another was a naked mouse, and one of them looked like a huge black and white rat. These traits are linked. Nobody knows why. They be careful what we're breeding for, and
Right.
and don't overdo it is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now I only have about just 10 minutes left, so let's.
Well, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would
that's
like to
what I
cover?
want to make sure. I've talked about some of the things I'm really interested in. Problems with breeding right now. I'm very concerned about. You're breeding cattle with bad feet, and of course they don't want to walk. That's a problem. Yeah, we should be breeding good feet. And when I go to cattle meetings and I show some of these yucky feet, people go, ooh. And then, again, this problem is slowly gotten worse. We have to, I don't want to be handling an animal like that at the slaughter plant. I want to handle cattle and walk, because 15 years ago, when it came to young fed beef, all the cattle could walk just fine. I can remember the days when lameness in fed cattle, young fed cattle, was just about non-existent, almost zero. And it slowly crept up with the latest survey right now. 8% of fed beef lame. One plant had something terrible, 23% lameness. Disgusting. And it's genetic. It's genetic, a lot of it.
Is there something that people that are listening to this podcast that also have care around animals and cows and the meat that they're eating? Is there anything that people can do to support you or support these cows?
What I'm seeing, there's a lot of people that want to go in the niche businesses, and you have the big suppliers, but then there's also in a lot of industries. I think a good model is our beer industry here. We have a big Budweiser plant. That's a gigantic national brand. And then we have all these little craft breweries, very small. They coexist with big. I think similar things, can happen in raising livestock, where you raise, grass-fed beef or whatever it is, and it's locally produced. I want to encourage those sort of things. Now, it doesn't replace big, but it's something that can coexist. It also makes the supply chain more resilient, because one of the problems with big, it's fragile. I don't care whether it's a meat plant or whether it's a pharmaceutical factory or some other thing. You break one of these big places, you've got a gigantic issue with supply. You have a more distributed supply chain, it's going to be more expensive, but it doesn't break as easily. Big's not bad, it's fragile. And when I brought that up about a couple of years before COVID hit, people thought it was crazy. And when COVID hit, we found out big is fragile.
Yeah.
It shut down 2 of our big pork plants. 300,000 head of pigs had to be euthanized and thrown away. Big, it's fragile.
Wow. That's just a great way to just bring people's attention to how they can help. And I think that's part of it, is we all need to do our part too in there. And I think that's a great reminder.
But that's and big can do a really good job. And what makes it cheaper is the economy of scale.
Right.
If you can buy feed by the trainload, feed costs are 30% cheaper. It's that simple.
Right.
So what do you think is the greatest challenge moving ahead and what you're working on? Anything that we can support
Well,
you
one
on?
of the things that I've been really interested in, cattle gets bashed for wrecking the environment. I just recently did a paper on grazing. If you do grazing right, 20% of the world's land can only be grazed. And if you graze it right, you can improve land. This is a paper I did grazing. I hope that's not
Yeah.
blurred.
Grazing cattle, sheep, and goats are important parts
Important
of
part of a
sustainable
sustainable agricultural
future.
future. There's a free download. And if you do grazing right, you can improve soil health, improve carbon sequestration. You do grazing wrong, it wrecks land. But what do you do with the 20% of the land in the entire world that can only be grazed? We need to be putting grazing animals on that land and doing it right. Another thing is cover cropping. If you just do monoculture, yeah, it works great in the short run. In the long run, you're wrecked.
Yeah.
So you need to do a cover crop, put some shape on it. I'm seeing all of these solar panels being put up, and they've put them too low and too close together to graze sheep under them. I think this is horrible. I'm not against solar panels, but let's mount them higher up and further enough apart so you can graze under them. You cannot let animals rub on a solar panel. They will bust them instantly. So you can use that land. I come into fly all the time, and I fly into cities like San Diego, California, and there should be a lot more solar panels on the roofs of the warehouses. That's where they belong. Flat roofed buildings. There's a place for the grazing animal, and it can be raised in a very sustainable way. Now, you couldn't just do all the grass fed and feed everybody, but we need to be using that land. Also, when you've got good family ranchers out on that land, they take care of the land. It can be a win-win situation for wildlife.
Yeah.
And there's a program here in the U.S. with the Audubon Society, that's a bird society, is working with ranchers to improve birds. So if you throw all your family ranchers off the land, nobody's going to take care of the land. It's going to be a mess. And I'm concerned that we got a lot of policymakers with abstract ideas about stuff. I have traveled, at least in the U.S., and also in other parts of the world, but in the U.S., I've been to every rural area where grazing is done in the U.S. And in other countries, I've been to a lot of places, especially South America. And we need to be, grazing animals, using them to improve land. That's something that needs to be done. Another thing, I've got another paper on animal welfare, and we've got to be giving animals a life worth living. You have to prevent suffering, but preventing suffering alone is not enough. We've got to give them a life worth living. But some of the theory that some of the academics are doing is way too complicated for commercial use. We've got to have simple scoring tools. When I worked with McDonald's, I didn't design facilities for McDonald's. What I did is I designed the auditing program. Yeah. But it was a very, very simple auditing program that you could teach somebody in a 2-day workshop to do. Because that's the reality. It's got to be simple, like traffic rules.
Yes. Wow, this is so inspiring. I'm just so thrilled that we've had this opportunity to chat with you.
No, and it's been very good talking with you. And you have to find practical ways to improve things.
Yes.
And the other thing is, I still write a lot of articles. I just wrote an article right now about the lameness and the heart issues. And some people are not going to be very happy with that article, but it's not okay to have all this heart failure. No. And I can remember 15 years ago, we did not have it, except at very high altitudes. It used to be called high altitude sickness. It's not high altitude sickness anymore.
Well, and I think it needs to be brought to the forefront, and that's the work that you're doing, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest welfare issues. And we've got to have animals living in decent environments. And we need to be doing that. We got to give them a life worth living, as David Mallour says in the 5 domains for animal welfare. I
love that. Thank you so much.
Well, it's great. great being with you. I need to sign off now so I can get on
Okay.
this other podcast. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Okay, I'm going to sign off then, and
Okay.
I really enjoy.